Hello, this is Yaro, and welcome to the Entrepreneur's Journey podcast. Today's guest is Michael Carruth. Hello, this is Yaro Starak, and welcome to an Entrepreneur's Journey podcast. Today's guest on the line with me is Mike Carruth, who came to me through a connection with my blog mastermind program. He's an original student from, by the looks of things, the very, very first intake, Mike. But today Mike is in charge of a network of BMX sites, which he's making a full-time income from, about $80,000 a year, which he's grown when he took over the sites. He acquired them from about $45,000 to $80,000. So we're going to hear about how he makes money and how this whole story came about, how he grew the sites and how he took them over. And Mike's actually got a very long background in the world of BMX. He was he's given me a bit of a preamble to the interview, and I know that at 14 he was basically left school to become a BMX photographer, and writer, which sounds like a 14-year-old kid's dream, to be honest, Mike. So thank you for joining me on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Yaro. It's great to be here, and I've been a longtime fan of the podcast, and it's really a dream come true, dream realized to be with you today.
Awesome. So I got the summary right in terms of the sites you're in charge of now, and that's pretty much your main focus in terms of an online business. Am I right?
It is, yeah. The only thing I'll clarify is that when I took over the websites, which started in the spring of 2008, we were actually I took the sites over at an income level of $4,500 a year, and then have grown it to $80,000 in that time.
Okay, big difference.
Well, not to toot my own horn or anything, but
well,
I just want to get the numbers right.
Very true.
So yeah, but it's been a really great 7 years of doing it, and just about 7 years now. And like you said, I did start as a photographer and writer. First as a BMX racer, from the age of 12, and then at 14, I got into the writing and photography aspect of it. I always really admired the magazines that were out at the time, and just wanted to do that and wanted to model those guys. And so my mother was very encouraging and said, hey, then go for it. You should, if you want to do it, and I did.
Yeah, that's a pretty supportive parent, I have to say. Like, I played video games at 14, and I doubt I would have been allowed to drop out of school to, pursue a professional video game career of any sort. So,
yeah, no doubt.
So I'd like to go back in time, of course, and learn in particular how you grew the income from these sites, because it sounds like this is your case of really ticking all the boxes in the sense that you're making enough money that you are living off the websites, but you're doing it in the subject that you really have had a lifelong passion in, and it's difficult to combine that. Like, most people don't get to work with the subject they love and do it all the time and make enough money to live off. So you've kind of ticked all those boxes, and that's rare. So I think it'd be great to kind of explore how you got to that point. So can you take us back? So you're 12 years old and you're racing BMXs. You get really involved with the community, I assume, and then you tell your mom you want to leave school to pursue this because you already had something going. That you had a job happening where you're getting paid to write or do photography.
Yeah. I was a freelancer. So I would, the magazines would pay me, pay my expenses, then pay me a little bit of, a stipend, a little bit on top of the expenses to go to the various races. So I was, flying to places like, Dayton, Ohio, and Memphis and Oklahoma City and stuff like that at age 14, which you couldn't really do today. But I did, in some cases fly alone to those locations at, 15, 16 years old. So it's kind of crazy to check in a hotel and take a cab from the airport and stuff. Can't imagine, my 15-year-old doing that today. So it's crazy, but yes. And so then, worked as a freelancer for a couple of years. I left school, as I said, it was kind of in the way. I really was never very good in school. And in fact, spent all of 8th grade in special education, where they told me that, I wasn't, or actually told my mother that I wasn't really a viable student. And, being a big strapping lad, I should, learn to work with my hands and sort of, get to be a manual labor type of career.
Ouch.
Versus something with my head. Yeah, I know. It's tough.
Now,
tough to hear that.
Were they aware that you were actually getting paid to do something creative that wasn't manual labor?
Well, at the point where they said that was 8th grade. I wasn't quite in that in the business yet.
Right.
I was aspiring to be there, and then just in the summer of 1980, early 1981, thereabouts, I started to write and to get published, and so that's when it kind of hit me that I could leave school where I really wasn't getting a lot of value anyway, and do this full time. And so that led me in 1985 to getting a staff position at a magazine in Los Angeles and moving out there, and and that was my career for the next few years. And so in 1988. I know we're skipping over lots of chunks of years, but this was all spent in the BMX industry, the bicycle industry, and that industry pretty much had a kind of a terrible downturn in 1988, 1989 with the advent of video games and some of the things that we see today, where kids are still, they're not riding bikes anymore today, and that's a problem we'll talk about a little later. But so I got out of the industry at that point and started another business.
I think 1988 would have been when I was playing video games as a 9-year-old. So that makes complete sense. Nintendo, it's their fault.
Yep.
Okay, so what happened next?
So what happened next is that I did a little time working over at an ad agency in Taipei, Taiwan, and started to learn a little about the advertising business. I was very interested in it because as a writer and photographer, I had at least 2 of the 3 skills to actually produce my own advertising, for clients. So I didn't have the graphic design skills at that point, and I never was really, a very good artist. I couldn't, I didn't have illustration skills or even production skills to actually, lay out, keyline and paste up as they did back then. But this was just as electronic production tools were coming into it. So I started to learn some of those very early production skills, with Quark Express and Adobe Illustrator. Actually, it was PageMaker first for me as far as a page makeup application. So those were some of the skills that I brought back to Chicago with me in 1991. And we started a friend of mine and my friend was a sales guy and I was more of the creative side. We started an ad agency called the Creative Alliance, and it was what would today be called a virtual agency. We put together a book of freelancers. We categorized them. We had these big binders on a shelf, and whenever we had a project come in, we poured through the binders and we put together a team, and we attacked the project, and that was very cool. That it worked well for the time. And then not long after that, we actually bought a computer, which was a huge investment at the time. And we started having these Saturday morning 10 a.m. jam sessions where people would come in and everyone would teach what they know. No one knew everything at that point, but everyone knew something. So we put together these little jam sessions and everyone taught what they knew for 20 minutes. And that led to a kind of a they told 2 friends scenario happening, and friends of those people would call us and say, hey, when are you doing your next Macintosh seminar? And ultimately in May of 1992, that led to the founding of a new company called Mac University, where we actually took as a business to teach people how to do this. And that was a business that I ran for 10 years, and then we changed the name and changed the direction a little bit from Macintosh only into PC and some Unix and stuff like that. And that was Digital Boot Camp was the name of that business. And so we continued on to do that and became very successful at doing that type of training. And I ultimately sold the business in 2007, and it's still operating today. And it was a great 15 years, but I was ready to move on from training was the point and do something else.
Right. I was going to ask, it's if you left the business, I'm assuming you had enough, as I can imagine you might have after 15 years.
Yeah.
Did you have a plan going forward after that, or are you just going to see what happened next?
Well, I had a book or a database, if you will, of ideas, and I had been a domain name collector from 1996 on to today. So I've always been very interested in domain names, and I've bought and sold hundreds of them over the years, and at any given time have maybe 200 or 300 in a portfolio. So all those domain names had an idea attached to them, of course, and so I wanted to realize some of those ideas, but life kind of took, like, let's say fate took its turn, and I just one day stumbled upon vintagebmx.com, which was where all the old guys that I used to hang out with in the old days and all the old bikes were on display, and new people now were in the sport, and the people who were in it back in my day had gotten back into it with their kids now, because they were in their mid 30s, mid 40s, and so all the kids were out at the track, and so that sparked an addiction to posting on the forums and hauling out all the old pictures, and and it was really just great to be back among that group of friends from 20 years past.
It's funny how you become vintage as you get older like that.
I know it, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you find this site. Now, you just used it as a user, right? You just participated, and how did the opportunity to potentially become the owner arrive? Well,
as I said, I was searching for the next thing to do, kind of, and I was starting to build out some early wireframes and stuff for a startup. And one day, I just had said to the owner of the site at the time, hey, just in passing, really, hey, if you ever are interested in selling the website, let me know. I might be interested in buying it from you. And within 2 weeks of that day, I drove to Phoenix, Arizona, and I took over the site. And I've been back into it. That was March 12th, 2008. And I'm here. Here I am today. And there was an opportunity just a few months later, 7 months later, to purchase the another website called bmxnews.com, which was a perfect domain name for me. I love that domain name. It has all the things you'd want out of a domain name, and it was a site. It was an up and running site at the time, but it really didn't have a lot of traffic or a lot of prestige behind it. And I saw the opportunity to really remake that into the marquee, the lead site, and set about it, because my whole thing was in writing and shooting content, and it was hard to do that as vintage BMX, but as BMX News, the opportunity to write and shoot and come up with cool story ideas was unlimited, and I was 100% in it.
Right, I can see your background being a photographer and a writer. You do want to own a content site and not sort of be restricted by maybe a forum with that word vintage in it as well, especially if you want to reach people who don't want the vintage aspect. But I am curious about the taking over of both sites. You said when you initially acquired them, it was $4,500 a year in total revenue. So I'm assuming, the acquisition price would have not been a ton of money. You would have been able to easily get a deal done there. Were you thinking, I'm going to take this over and turn it into my full-time income, or is this sort of, I love the subject, I want to be in charge, and I'm going to buy them?
Yeah, it was more the latter. I knew, from days gone by that, you didn't really make, you didn't make a huge income from the sport of BMX, really, and you really did it for the love of the game. And if you could do it for the love of the game and also sort of eke out an existence, then you were doing really well. So and I didn't have any designs on setting the world on fire as far as revenue back then, and so, but I did have a vision, and even from the time that I was 14, I always wanted to own a BMX magazine, and that was the big thing back in the 80s were the magazines. Obviously, there was no internet yet. So, the opportunity to have what is the modern day version of a magazine, that was super exciting. And the opportunity to use my business skills and the skills that I had in training, as well as my old days skills in writing and shooting, bringing all that together was definitely super exciting.
So what were the websites? I'm assuming there was a small membership, a little bit of ad revenue coming in. That was the $4,500 a year. Yep. Was there an email list? And what were you actually buying? Because people always find this interesting in the sense that how do you even determine how much you should pay for that kind of business or website, not really a business?
I know, and it's true. To me, it really was more of a gut feel thing. I did not really, If a business person, were to ask you what are you buying, you would definitely not have a good business case to buy, to spend that kind of money on a property like this. But it was, we had some serious traffic at the time, a million page views a month, and from all over the world. And I definitely saw the opportunity there and to speak to a larger audience. Which I definitely always wanted to do, and then also to get back into the sport as a major player, and I definitely liked that idea. And I knew that I had a lot to offer because that kind of experience and that mix of talents was not present in the sport at the time. So I was excited to bring that back.
Yeah, wow, a million page views. That's a massive opportunity. You certainly should be making more than $4,500 a year off that, though I can see there's some work to be done to make that happen. I'd love to talk about how you grew it, but before we do that, where does Blog Mastermind fit into this? Because you took my program, but these aren't exactly blogs. I can see how they're content sites and they're communities, so there's certainly some overlap in concepts. But where does it fit into the picture?
Well, for me, one of the things that I took, so Blog Mastermind came around. I joined it on June 25th, 2007. I looked up the old email today with the welcome to Blog Mastermind, email, and right. And so this, if you in the timeline here, that is like a year and 9 months, 10 months, or whatever before I actually acquired these websites, and it was during the time where I was looking for what's next because I hadn't quite sold Digital Bootcamp yet, what I took from it really was one of the gems that really helped make all this happen was one that was gleaned from Blog Mastermind. And it was, the most, you had said in one of the lessons, the most important variable when it comes to topic selection is whether you enjoy the subject and whether there is potential to make money from it. So, to me, when it, a few months later, when it came time to make this decision, those are two of the variables or two of the components that was like, do I enjoy the subject? Yeah, I could definitely go full tilt into this thing 12 hours a day and be stoked all the way. Whether there's a potential to make money from it, looking at the revenue at the time, any sane person would say probably not. But I also knew that there was a lot of untapped potential that wasn't being explored, because the people who were running these sites prior to my acquisition of them were really doing it more as a hobby and not as a business. And so it wasn't really about the money for them, and nor is it about the money to me today, but it is, it's more about it because it's a business today versus being just a hobby.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, this subject matter, because I'm not sure if you're aware, I purchased miniature motorcycle forums as one of my investments.
Really? I didn't know that.
No, it's just funny seeing that you happen to own two sites that have two forums about bicycles, because I had two forums about miniature motorcycles. That being said, cool. I wasn't nothing to do with that niche. I'd never had a miniature motorcycle. I wasn't interested in it. I was purely an investment strategy. But that's another story, and I've told it on my blog, so if people want to hear that, head to Entrepreneur's Journey. Okay, so you took my program before this, and I can see, I am a little curious, did you think about starting a blog at any point in time, though? Was that a part of it?
Yes, I did. And I had one for a while, which was called the What If List. And it was really during the time that I was going through the course. And I had skipped over large chunks of it and then came back later and dove back in. So it was the way that you had had it laid out was very, very helpful to a guy like me who was running a business and had a family. And it was the epitome of an online education. It was at will kind of thing where I could come back and do it as I pleased. And so in that case, I had the What If List blog. And I was writing, a little bit about it, but I really, as a journalist, from days past, I really liked the idea of more of an art, more of a formal structure to things, more of an article structure versus more of a conversational blog structure. And so that was what really, again, helped me along to start writing on the BMX News website.
I often do feel for journalists who've grown up learning to write a certain style that just really doesn't gravitate to people on the internet because people like that conversational tone, and that's not journalistic writing. So, especially with a niche like BMX, you could write journalistic, but people are going to be much more interested in you being Mike and talking about your passion for it naturally. So let's go forward then with the growth of these sites. So what exactly did you do to turn it from $4,500 a year to $80,000 plus a year in income?
Sure. Well, it took a few years, definitely. And one of the first things that I did was to really just start applying a business structure to it, so that the customer service was more on point, and we had an organized plan where here's what you get when you buy an ad package. I also took the step of taking out of a CPM or CPA ad model, so we don't. That's not how we sell today. We started selling just based on tenancy, X amount of dollars a month, flat rate, non-metered, and then we just divide up the traffic by way of however many advertisers we have. And so, again, the ecosystem within which we operate is a very small mom and pop business ecosystem. So they're not used to hearing things like CPM and $10 1,000 or whatever the rate would be. So we tried to make it more digestible for them. The other thing that we did was to make it just one package, and one money gets them all. So you can if one ad investment gets you your ad buttons and ad banners on all three websites, so that it's network wide and you don't have to choose. And then at that point, we offer two options as far as how you can buy in: just a quarterly option, or an annual option. And so we don't do monthly deals, because it's just as a one-man show, and maybe with a virtual assistant every now and then, it's very difficult to babysit a lot of 30, 40 accounts on a monthly basis. Credit cards decline and people drop off and stuff like that. So you really don't have time to go in and resell the deal every month. So the quarterly and the annual deal really is it makes it so much easier for all of us, for the advertiser and for me.
I'm curious. People always ask, how do you determine what to charge for advertising? How did you do it?
Well, it started out as we called it the 333, which was 3 sites, 3 months for $300. And so it was just a $1,200 a year, buy-in, if you will. Now we've gone, the annual campaign is $3,600 for the year. So it's still very, very approachable by, like normal business standards. But, it's still hard for some of the advertisers in our niche to bite off. So, they do that for $900 a quarter, or for the $3,600 a year.
And how did you decide how many advertisers you could take? Because obviously, the more you have, the less impressions each one gets, right?
Right. Yes, and we do sell out on occasion. It varies because the dynamic of traffic has changed a lot over the past few years. Because back in 08 rather, 09 and stuff, we didn't really have Facebook and Twitter as major players in our space. But today, it is an important part of the ecosystem. So it changed our traffic, dramatically, in terms of we're getting, more visitors but fewer page views, than we used to get. So we're getting more, maybe you're like a little bit less in terms of page views, but more visitors. So it changed the dynamic a little bit, and we're still responding to that. We've got a major redesign coming up this fall, and on both actually on all three websites. So that's going to help a lot in terms of engagement.
Now, have you experimented with any other forms of monetization, or has it just always been displaying banners for a quarterly or an annual fee?
The other thing that we do is we've toyed a little bit with merchandising, logo T-shirts and T-shirts of some of my photos from the races and stuff like that. So that's definitely something we with the redesign we're going to do more of. We have a small membership on the forum website where people donate to help keep things rolling, and that definitely helps. And then we also I do freelance work for some of our advertisers, as a consultant basis, where I don't do work for outside companies like that aren't advertisers, but within our little group, I'll do things like write press releases and do special photo sessions and things of that nature.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this wasn't as simple as putting more banners on your site because you already had all this great traffic and suddenly the money, doubled, tripled, quadrupled.
No.
Have you been proactively marketing the site to build the traffic further? Like, what are the keys to make this massive improvement? And bearing in mind, it's quite a number of years, too, that you're talking about.
Yes. And I'm certain that I could have done better had I been more aggressive with it. But I didn't want to be overly aggressive with commercialization, because in our niche, if you commercialize too much, then you're going to see a huge backlash from the readers, from the users. So really, we didn't want to put. I mean, right now we have ads in certain places, but we've held off on doing ads, like background wrappers and things like that. That really, I didn't want it to be a blinking Las Vegas Boulevard of ad creatives on there. So the other thing that we did that I just want to mention is that we also started selling sponsorships and special sections. So we have our Pro Max top story is a branded top story that gets posted every day, and so one of our awesome parts manufacturers is the sponsor of that, and a company, Dan's Comp, is our race coverage sponsor for the year. So they've come in and stepped up to be the race coverage sponsor, and some others. So it's you just try and see what happens, and how you can. Some other things didn't work out. We tried to do an auction site where we put up an auction site and thought maybe that would be awesome for people to be able to sell off their parts. Well, that didn't work at all.
You have a lot of the similar ideas I had with the miniature motorcycle site. Like, I was thinking I'll add a blog to it to provide content, not just a forum, and I'll test selling some products using affiliate links and not just banner ads, and selling directly to paying companies. And also I was thinking, we need to find a way to get people buying and selling a bit more, because I had some results with that with previous forums. So it's funny how you try all these things, but the community ends up deciding what works.
Yes.
Like, they really
big time.
control it all, don't they? And you have to be careful, like you said.
Do.
Yeah. Okay, so now you have the third site we haven't really mentioned yet. You do have a third site, which is it's like a photography site. Is that what?
Yeah.
So
it's called photosareposted.com. And in BMX racing, and it's important to note that we are BMX racing versus freestyle. So BMX racing is an Olympic sport now. It was since the Beijing Olympics, and they went also to the London Olympics and coming up for Rio. So, but to say that in racing, you have a I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where were we?
No, you're just saying you have your other website.
Yeah. Oh, so photos are posted, and so in the racing space, we there's a term called motos are posted, where they actually post all what race or what heat race you as a rider are in. So our site is photos are posted, and so it's when I go to 20 races a year all over the country, and shoot photos and come back with 3, 4, 500 pictures per weekend, and I post them up on the website, and that is another one of those monetization opportunities that we tried, but ultimately didn't work, the way we wanted. So we just made it free for everybody. So I post the images, I put the logo on them, and I put it in a very tasteful way down in the lower left or lower right-hand corner, and people can freely use those images on social media, or even we publish them in such a way that you can even make a small print out of them, all on us, not for any additional funds.
I really like that, because you're becoming a permanent part of the community psyche, because all the social media with Facebook sharing the photos from the event, it's branded as from you, so you'll be known as the leading site that the community goes to. And I think that's really important to retain not just obviously for the sake of the community and having the traffic and the audience, but the advertisers want to be seen on the leading site. And that's an important part. It's the concept of preeminence, which I talked about in my other coaching program quite a lot, where you do get to do things like charge more for advertising and get the lion's share of the advertising budgets, just because you are the main player in the space. Even if they're not getting a ton of clicks, the advertiser wants to be in the conversation that the BMX user has when they think about going to buy something. And they will remember seeing the logos and the banners on your site. And it's funny. Yeah. You're triggering my memory, because I did this with my very first website, actually, my Magic the Gathering website. And same model. We covered card game news, we had a forum, and we had paying advertisers. And I knew for a lot of them, they just want to be where the community was. That's the most important thing. And that's probably the case for you too, right?
Oh, no question about it. Yeah, it is. And one of the other things that we've done in this, to build up that value, because again, our advertisers, they're mom and pop companies, so we really have to prove, value to them on an ongoing basis. And so one of the other things that we've done aside from that is that so the way that BMX racing is structured is that there are teams, and so each of our advertisers has riders who ride their jersey or their apparel, what have you. And so at the end of each race, I go through my photo set and I tag every single one of our advertisers in my photo set in Adobe Lightroom, and I export out a dedicated photo archive for each of those advertisers, and I put together a list of all the names of each advertiser, and then upload those images to our FTP site, and on Monday morning or Tuesday morning, send out a dedicated archive for each advertiser, so they can pull down their images, on an easy basis. They don't have to wade through 600 images. It's all delivered for you as part of that program. It's not an additional charge. That's just part of the service.
Wow, that's a real value add. That's fantastic. And you could tag the names of the riders in Facebook and things like that too, right?
Yep, you absolutely could, and so what they do, with that then is they'll take those images and they will put them up on Facebook. They'll use them on Twitter and put them on their own websites. They'll tag them and stuff, and our logo still remains on there. The other thing that also includes is high resolution images. So if they want to use those in print ads or trade show displays or things like that. Now, granted, it's sort of an unorthodox way as a photographer. It's a kind of an unorthodox way to treat my images, because I definitely have gotten flack before for diluting, making it too cheap for people. But again, this is where we are today, and so people don't like to pay for images, and we're no longer in a day and age where people will pay $500, $600, $700 or $1,000 for an image. You might as well just, accept that and just make it work for you, which I have.
Yeah, and you're a perfect example. You've created a platform where your photographs help you to make money, not directly, but indirectly. They're part of the whole process. So it's, it's a great example for anyone who's a creative that, you do need to own some sort of asset now that's around the community that the community wants to participate in, that has some sort of commercialization aspect, whether it's selling products or selling advertising or both. And I don't think the media is how you make the money anymore. It's how you get the attention and how you participate in the community. It's up to you then to find clever ways to make money from all of this. And obviously you're doing a great job with these relationships with advertisers. So, Mike, I'd like to know, where are you going next with this though? Like, obviously it's a fairly small niche by the way you talk about it. Is there room for you to grow, and what are your plans?
I think there is room for us to grow, and there's room for us to grow by the sport growing. So we do have, we've gotten a little bit of a bump. When I say I mean the sport of BMX racing as a whole have gotten a nice bump, or a little bit of a bump off the Olympics, and being a part of the Olympics. Although the type of racing that occurs at the Olympics is much different, more extreme than the kind of racing that will happen at your local track. But as BMX racing, rises, then that tide will lift all boats. And so one of the things that we're going to do this summer is to develop a beginner BMX Racing 101 microsite that will be a separate website, and it will cater exclusively to getting into the sport. Here's how to get into it. Now, the sanctioning body, who is the governing body of BMX racing in North America, USA BMX, they do a great job of that as well. But I think that this is one of those times, or one of those aspects that, as a chorus of people need to come to the table and offer that content.
Awesome. Yeah, at least there's a future there. Now, just before I wrap up, Mike, I'm sort of curious to see how you technically set this up, like the actual picture of how your company runs. You are mostly one person show at the moment, right? Or do you have? Yeah. Do you do the technology like these sites? Are they WordPress with a forum plugin, or what are they running on?
Yeah, so as far as the structure, I'm here in Chicago, and I sort of the ringmaster, if you will. I do have contributors, guest blog posters, people who go out and cover events for me on occasion, and so I probably have 4 or 5 contributors at this time, and then on the forum site, I have 3 amazing moderators who help and keep the community in line, because it's good now, but it definitely at first had the tendency to cascade off the rails sometimes, people just running into a room and yelling fire kind of thing. And so we have volunteer moderators on the forum site. And so on the forum side, the VintageBMX.com site is run off of Envision Powerboard. And I've found that is the best forum for what I like to do. Obviously, PHPBB is out there too, but Envision is a commercial product that is supported by an operating business. So things like support and updates and stuff it happens very quickly and very, very solid. And BMX News is on WordPress, and we're developing, as I said, a new design for the interface this summer, and so it'll stay on WordPress, but just with more modern, hooks to the social media and video and stuff like that.
I'm glad to hear blogging is a part of this after you took my course in some way, if you're just using WordPress.
Yeah. Well, but there's. What if nothing else, to the listener, what I'd like to kind of push forth on that is that blog mastermind, yes, it may not be strictly blogging, but there are, the discipline of writing every day, posting every day, the publicity that you outlined in the course, and all the stuff that you spent the time to develop in the course is dead on important and super applicable to anybody who's running any sort of an ongoing business. Yes, you may have to adapt that to your own ends, but there's great content and great lessons in there for sure.
I guess if you're running a content site, it doesn't matter whether it's a blog or a news site like your site. You might call it a blog magazine with BMX news, and you've got contributors. I did want to ask, were any of those people you mentioned paid, or are they all on a volunteer basis?
No, our contributors, some are paid, and some are just volunteer contributors. Other, like if I send someone out to cover, they have to get on an airplane and go and cover a race, take pictures and actually be responsible for posting those images by a certain time each night. With the level of responsibility comes the pay. So if you're just wanting to send in an article every once in a while, that's awesome, and we'll definitely make you part of the masthead. And then when those jobs that are paying come about, I know that I can turn to those specific people to execute those assignments.
Fantastic. Yeah. So you're basically running a magazine like you always wanted to, or a blog magazine, what I would call it nowadays. But they are the new version of the magazine, aren't they? You're publishing regular content. You're doing coverage. You've got a team of contributors, but mostly you're in charge, and you build the community around that, and then make money testing different ways. That's kind of like the nutshell story, right?
Yeah, it is sort of the nutshell story, absolutely. And as far as what's next, the other, just to piggyback on that a little bit, I don't know exactly, which is the exciting part. I mean, I really, it's nice to have the strategy of what's next and stuff, and that's why, again, we are doing those site redesigns, and we're adding in additional engagement points for users. Whether it's merchandising, or we have a new feature which, I will also spin off as a separate non-BMX type of website next year, called Phototorial, and it is a way to create more editorial specific photo slideshows. The slideshows that you have in WordPress now are just a photo with a little strip of a caption. It's not quite enough, so a Phototorial will be a much more robust presentation for that. So it's exciting.
Awesome. All right, Mike, last question for you, and this is really for our listeners. There's going to be people hearing this story who are thinking, well, I love, let's say sailing, or I love some sort of, wood carvings, or, there's maybe another competitive sport, but it's not the big sport, it's curling. Good old
curling is always used. Yeah, curling is the universal,
I love curling.
Is the universal example of that. Yeah.
I wonder if there's any forum communities out there about curling, like BMX has, but there must be. You think it's a pretty big sport. But anyway,
I'm sure they make millions.
Who knows? But whatever the case is, there's people listening who have these passions, and I think for me, listening to your story, okay, it's not a multi-million-dollar company. Maybe it'll get there, maybe it won't. But the important part is you are really immersed in the subject that you've cared about for most of your life now, and making a living from it. You get to do everything around it, explore ideas just around this subject. So for a lot of people, that's more important than getting tons of money doing something they don't care about, if you can do both. I'm curious to hear your advice for that person who's thinking, okay, I love this subject. I want to have a site, a community, a forum, a news site with content writers, and I want to make enough money. I want to make that $80,000 to $100,000 a year from this business. And they're thinking, well, maybe I could buy one like Mike's done, or I'd start one from scratch. But whatever the case is, it's 2014, so they're going to have to do different things to maybe what you did in 2007. What would you say to someone who's either one, going to start something from scratch or considering buying? What's the most important things they have to get right in order to reach the point where you are?
Well, if they have the luxury of being able to buy an existing site that has traffic already and a reputation in the community, then hands down, that's the preferable path. And still, then there's a lot that has to go into doing, the right things beyond that. But as far as starting from scratch, you just have to totally dive in and be at the events. If you were starting a sailing website, you would need to be at those sailing events, and you'd need to be hobnobbing with those people that are the movers and shakers of the industry. I had a little bit of a leg up because I was known from my my career early 25 years ago. So my name was still out there as someone who was, a media person from back then. But, if you come in, totally cold, like you're a total unknown, you're starting it totally from scratch, you're going to have a lot of patience and a lot of perseverance to push through the setbacks. And there's going to be, I'm a big fan of Zig Ziglar, and there was a time where a story he told that talked about a specific type of tree where they have to water it and water it and water it and water it for years and years on end, and then no sign of life whatsoever. But then one day, boom, it pushes through the soil, and then it grows 12 feet or something like that in a small amount of time. And that's a great analogy to how this would probably work for someone like that, because they have to put a time on the calendar that says, I'm going to dedicate 2 or 3 years to this, and then I'm going to get up every day and I'm going to just run at it as fast and as hard as I can. And if you can't do that, then that's fine, but you just need to have more of a patience for your extended timeline.
Do you think there's anything current that's really, really important in the sense that you should be spending a lot of time on Facebook now? And obviously each subject matter is probably different where the community hangs out, but especially for today, if you want to make the right choices and not spend time doing the things that won't work, do you see any areas that accelerate the results now that you should focus on? Any platforms or techniques?
Here's the thing with Facebook is that it's kind of come full circle in the sense that, for a little while, it was coming up in the world, and then it started, you started to build these big fan bases, and then, they throttled back on the reach. And so now, you don't really, if you have 20,000 Facebook followers or whatever, you're not going to, or fans, you're not going to get the reach that you used to get. So you have to spend money on boosting posts if you really want that out there. And so,
so do you think
it's
maybe having a blog and actually writing, or a magazine, or is the best first step then, like controlling your content and spending your time there, and then just seeing which of the external platforms end up working best for you?
Yes, and also, just taking a lesson from Blog Mastermind again, the publicity module that you had in there of guest posting and reaching out to media and things of that nature, where you can and this is no secret, but just the ability to become an authority on yacht racing or curling or BMX racing or what have you, to start to make some of those inroads into growing the links and growing your ability to reach out to to a broader audience, because the community sites are great, but one of the things that I have found and actually implemented is that I don't allow other websites to come on my forum and try and suck off traffic, and I assume that there's that's the way that a lot of other forum masters do it, right?
Well, I mean, possibly.
Did you when you ran your forum? Did you run it that way?
You mean go to other forums or stop other forums?
Stop other forums, like stop other people from saying, "Hey, I just started this new website and come check it out." Right.
Like you, when I run forums, they were such small niches. There just wasn't a lot of people trying to compete. That way. Magic, definitely not. I had that. There wasn't no other Australian sites, and that was very early days. And with miniature motorcycles, you know what? There might have been, but I didn't moderate it. I wasn't. It was really a passive investment sort of site for me. So the moderators were looking at that, and I don't know. Maybe they were having other sites trying to take some of the traffic away. I think if you're contributing to one community and linking to your own site, that's okay, as long as you're there to contribute to the community. But if you're just saying, come visit my site, that's just spamming, like comment spamming, right? So, exactly. That shouldn't be allowed. But yeah,
right. Yeah. So again, it's I'm definitely in line, first in line to take the new version if you come out with it. I think it's going to be amazing, and all the new techniques and the new trends and content that you're going to be coming up with. So you're doing it, right?
But yeah, I am, and I keep. There's so many different ways to run a business. So I like hearing a story like yours. Maybe it's not the quickest way. Well, it is a quick way if you can find a community you can buy. That's probably the quickest way ever to have something up and running. But then, the starting it from scratch can take a long time to build community, and sometimes it's just quicker to go and, find a product you can sell straight away. But there's all kinds of different ways to skin a cat, and that's what this podcast is about, is hearing the different sorts of stories. And I shouldn't talk about cats. There's a cat staring at me right now. That was the wrong analogy to use. So, but Mike, I got to wrap up because we've got more interviews to get to. So I want to thank you for coming on my show and telling your story. What are the sites that people can check out especially if they're interested in BMX? For sure, they want to check out what you're doing, right?
Yeah, no doubt, and especially in Australia, like you are, we have two of the top champions. Sam Willoughby is from Adelaide, and he is the Olympic silver medalist from London. And Caroline Buchanan is the current world champion for the women. She's from Canberra. So BMXnews.com. And also vintagebmx.com. And Vintage BMX is a forum site that covers freestyle and racing and pretty much everything to do with BMX of any era. So if you were a BMX rider in the 80s or the 70s, definitely stop by because there's going to be a lot of great stuff up there for you.
Yeah, and check out Mike's sites too, just to see how he's running his community, where the ads are, how things run. So if you want to set up your own community-based site and make a living from it, this is one of the examples you can follow. So, Mike, thank you.
Yaro, I'd like to thank you and keep up the great work with the podcast and all the courses. So I'll be definitely watching and listening more.
Great. Appreciate it, Mike. Good luck with the growth of the BMX network as well. Thank you. And to all the listeners, thanks for listening in, guys, to this point in the interview. This has been another Entrepreneur's Journey podcast. My name is Yaro. You can find the show notes and all my other episodes as well as all my blog content just by Googling my name, which is Yaro, Yaro. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you again on a future episode. Goodbye.